Hello and welcome everyone to this very special festive tech calendar, special edition with the amazing Miri Rodriguez. Miri's session today is going to be titled Empathy, the Rise Against the Machines. Just to note that there'll be questions and answers at the end, and Miri's been very generous. She's going to give away a copy of her Kindle book. So that's fantastic. So if you ask a question, you go into the prize draw raffle and we can announce the winner straight after this. So good luck everyone and enjoy, and we'll pass it over to Miri.
Hi, thank you so much, Gregor and Richard. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here today, wherever you're tuning in from. And I want to talk about something that is very special and dear to my heart, and that is empathy. That is something that I have learned in my trajectory as a storyteller, as I worked in engineering, actually the engineering function at Microsoft. I had to learn what that meant, and then I had to learn what that meant for me, and then for my audiences, and then for products that we serve, for the things that we do, especially in technology. So I want to share with you a little bit of what that looks like for me, and how I've learned this art of empathy. I first thought that this was a personality trait that you just needed to have, or you had, and I didn't realize how important it is. It's actually something that can be built, that you can grow into, that you can aspire to as a skill set. And for me, what was really important about empathy is understanding that it is at the heart of innovation. Empathy truly is the thing that allows us to encode this skill set into everything that we do, in our communications, in our technology, in everything that we do. And especially now, post-COVID era, I think is the most important thing to think through. In fact, pre-COVID era, I learned that LinkedIn comes out with a report every year. And this was posted in January, right before COVID hit in the States. And empathy was the #1 theme out of all the trends in hiring and being hired. In fact, thinking about how people like you and I were wanting to get hired by certain companies, we are now as employees thinking, is this company empathetic enough? What are they going to be doing for me to take care of me? And it's vice versa. Empathy became the #1 skill set that companies were thinking when they were hiring someone. So that's a very incredible thing to think about. It is now a skill set that you have to be considered a leader in your industry, not just your hard skills and your expertise in your academia. Truly, empathy is something we have to hone into. This was before COVID. Imagine post-COVID, all the things that we've been going through and all the things that we've been pushed to think about in this very uncertain year that we're getting over. So as I think about empathy, I was thinking back before 2020, thinking about the machines, because I have this talk I call Empathy, the Rise Against the Machines. And I was thinking about those machines that were built before digital, what those machines looked like. And so here you have a photo of a car in a crash test dummy. These dummies typically look like males. They're about 172 pounds, 5'9", and they typically don't look like the rest of the population, which will be elderly and women. And they're consistently building cars that are built for men. That basically tells us that there's no empathy in the machine. And so what happens here is that women are likely 17% more likely to die in a car crash. And every time she gets in a car, even though we represent 50% of the user population. So when we think about how important empathy is in the machines, as we move into the digital world, and we're seeing this digital revolution actually accelerate through COVID-19, brands that were still maybe starting that digital evolution now we're basically accelerated through and having to go virtual and use the virtual environment. We have to think more about how we are creating these products, how we're designing products with empathy. We have to think about our own individual empathy. It starts with us. When we think about the next generation of machines, there are predictions about the future. There's predictions about what they're going to go do in the very near future. And as I look at these predictions, actually, it's important to recognize translating languages was predicted for 2024. And this already happened last year, actually. HoloLens was able to create a real-time translator. And so we probably are closer to these predictions than we imagine and we think, as the machines work tirelessly 24/7 to get better at their craft. They don't get tired. They don't they don't have boyfriends and girlfriends and partners. They don't go to sleep. They don't have to eat. They literally are built in a way that are meant to perfect themselves more and more as humans are doing the human thing. They're doing the machine thing. So how important is empathy as we begin to build these machines that are going to go do all these things for us? And even more, I was thinking about Satya and what he said, Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO, my CEO, and when he thought about saying, hey, when the question was asked, so what happens to us as humans as we can begin to integrate these machines more and more into our world? And he said something like this. He said, we will begin to amplify more our human ingenuity. What that means is we're going to have more time to get creative, to have fun, to get back to our children, our childhood ideas, where we innovate, where we don't care about painting and also building a plane and doing it all at the same time. We get to do everything and be and people. What my friend Dana Sarkar says, we're ballerina and an astronaut, and we're so many different things. We get to do that more and more because the machines will get to do the rest of the minutia of the operational work. But again, let's not forget how important that minutia in operational work is if it's not built with empathy. When we think about the modern workplace, for example, we've been very busy in tech building solutions and architecture for the modern workplace, but we haven't thought about the modern worker. What does he or she look like? How are they going to think through and enable and live through the technologies that we're building for the next generations? I can tell you I have two teenagers. One is 18 years old, the other one's 17. And they're, of course, tech natives. They are Gen Z. We're also looking at Gen Alpha. When I wrote my book, I actually wrote a chapter about this idea called unobvious trends, looking through trends that may not be obvious immediately, but that are being created and weaving into themes that we'll be seeing very soon. In fact, when I wrote my book 2 years ago, some of those trends are already happening now. Because they were not obvious back then, but as we were looking at and researching those patterns, we find these trends coming to fruition today. One of those trends is the idea that the modern worker, the Gen Z and then Gen Alphas, they are consuming products and they're using products at an emotional level. They are being empathetic. They're not just buying a product for the quality of that product or the service. They're actually thinking, do I align with that company's values? Do I, by making this purchase transactions, what am I contributing to? What is the stance of the brand? And they're very creative. In the past, we used to think about how how we lived and how we entered the office, how we actually separated our working experience from our lived experience. And this was probably you and I. This goes down to Generation X from a boomer generation. So we have two very distinct generations here, and possibly the older millennial generation as well. And so as we move through the younger generations, the younger millennials, the Gen Zs and Gen Alphas, we're seeing this trend that as the future, which is actually now, before COVID, actually, I gave this talk. This was about how they see the world, how they don't conform to the factory work ideas that we had established for modern workplace. And to them, it looks like this. And so when you think through innovation, when you think through technology, the modern workplace solutions, we have to empathize with the modern worker. How do they think? What do they think? How will they reinvent the solutions? How will they implement those solutions? They're no longer conforming when a machine is being built to say, this is how you're supposed to be using it. They're going to say, okay, thank you for creating this. I'm going to go do something else with it if I can. I'm going to go invent something. I'm going to build something for myself. I'm going to customize it for me. So empathy at its best is inclusive. And that's why it's so important in our technology today. Empathy at its best thinks through how the technologies that you're building, that you're creating, that you're designing will land with the many different generations and the generations to come. What will they look like? How will they use this technology for good or bad? For me, when I thought about this process and when I learned more about this process, it was a daunting idea, empathy was, because I was not being empathetic in my own craft. I was brought in to be a storyteller in core services design, core services engineering at Microsoft. And when I was thinking about my work, I was actually asked to tell stories about our own digital transformation. My task, we were hired, three of us were hired, and I was assigned to data and AI. That was my area. And it was daunting because I was a writer, I was a marketer, and I thought I knew what writing and marketing was until I landed in a very tech place where I had to write content for techies, for people like you, when I'm not one, even though I am in the industry. So for me, I had to start with this idea of empathy. I began to submit my content through this cycle, and very soon realized as I failed that I was not being empathetic. In fact, I'm not an empath. I took a test. It's called the Clifton Strengths Test. And in this test, I realized my empathy level out of 35 personality attributes, my empathy level is 33 out of 35. So way low in the scale. And so if you're like me, it's okay. Don't fret. You can actually become an empath. It's a thing. And I began to think about what that idea looked like, what becoming an empath is. So if you stay with me for the next few minutes, I want to talk about that path of becoming an empath for your brand, for who you are. How important that is that you start with you as an engineer, as an architect, whatever function you're serving in the tech industry, how important that is, again, as we build the next generation of machines. The very first thing is find your universal truth. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you working for a company and doing what you do? Why do you get up in the morning to do what you do? To code, to build, to create? That's an important question to ask yourself every day. And that is empathy at its best. It's you thinking about that universal truth. For me, as I entered the tech world and as I began to live my experiences as a woman in tech, even more with intersectionality as a Latina woman in tech, I found that for me it was important that my universal truth became about belonging. I wanted other women to belong in tech. I wanted them to feel like they were part of this generation that was paving the way for other women, our daughters and our daughters' daughters. That universal truth is important because if you don't have that North Star when you build, it will be almost robotic, ironically. You're just going to go do things, and before you know it, you're on autopilot and you're not really building with intention. Empathy builds with intention. Empathy creates and innovates with intention. Ask your question. Ask the question, what feeling do I want to spark with this story, with this product, with this device, with this brand? And that's important because that is inserting, encoding empathy in the machine. I realized there were three levels of empathy, and I want to walk you through them real quick. The first one is cognitive empathy. There you are, looking at the rest of your humans and the human race, and thinking about how you fit in, thinking about how you drive what you come to do every day, how you insert that into our human condition, reminding yourself that they are humans. You know, this for me practically looked very different when I realized, for example, that the content that I was writing for my engineers, it was good content in my estimation, but it wasn't landing correctly because I had not stopped to think how they consume that content. We all consume content differently. And so when I began to be a cognitive empath, I realized, whoa, you know what? Of course, they don't want to hear from me. The content's not landing because they don't want to hear from a marketer or a storyteller. They don't want me to sell them anything. They want facts. They want data. They want to learn more. They want to read. So I began to change the way my content, the same content, looked so I can land it better with them. I became a ghost blog writer, and I had an engineer be the face of that content. I realized that they liked pointer blogs, very factual, driven blogs that would then lend itself to maybe a white paper where they can learn more if they had time to read more because they love to read. You love to read. And so that's cognitive empathy at its best. It wasn't that my product wasn't good. It was that I had not been empathetic with my audience. Think about your product, think about your brand, think about your services, whatever it is that you come to create and to build. If you don't stop for a moment to think about the inclusion of the human race, then we're missing the mark and we're missing opportunities to drive it at a better and a deeper level. Emotional empathy, it's a little bit deeper than that. It actually enables us to think about our own humanity as well, come in as human. And as I said, it's not an easy proposition. I know that. I'm not an empath, so it's not easy. It doesn't come natural to me. But I can tell you I'm much better than I was 3 and 4 years ago. I work on this every day, and you can as well. Emotional empathy, it's about you coming in and just kind of not just leading the way and thinking, hey, we're this innovator, we're thought leaders, we're doing this technology, but sitting down and leveling yourself as a human with other humans. It's you recognizing your imperfections. It's you recognizing your flaws and your pitfalls and your challenges, all the things that we are going through together as a human race. I know and I believe COVID-19 has enabled an opportunity for us to pause for a moment as we close out this year. I love this idea of an advent calendar, because it just kind of, gives us that countdown to the end of this very terrible year that we've had, to reflect, to think through day and day, and how, we would be remiss if we didn't do that today, if we didn't think through, if we didn't pause for a moment and reflect, hey, what has this done for me individually? All of us have been impacted at one level or another by this terrible pandemic. Some of us have been impacted deeper than others. Some of us have lost people, and so it's not an easy thing to go through. And as we begin to embrace this idea of empathy, how does this land post-COVID era? How does it change us for the better? And that's the question to ask. The last level of empathy is compassionate empathy. That's the deepest kind. It's definitely, certainly the hardest kind to achieve. This one is the one where you actually sit with yourself individually and you think about your humanity. When you think about what that looks like. Every year, at the end of the year, I used to travel and go somewhere where I would self-calibrate. This idea it's mine. I talk about this actually in my book. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing because we tend to lie to ourselves a whole lot. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, do you work out? Yeah, I work out. Probably went to the gym once in a month. Do you read? Yeah, I'm a reader. I love to read. What was the last book you read? When did you read it? I often say to my mentees, your time and your money don't lie. They'll tell you what your priorities are. So in this time of reflection, I think about those things. I think about how I spent my time and my money, and what my priorities were based on those two very real data points. As a human, we continuously want to improve, but the reality is that we don't have the discipline at times to move through what it takes, to do what it takes. Compassionate empathy enables that opportunity, enables you to just kind of open your heart, as the illustration shows here, and think about where you are, what you're feeling, how you're standing today. It doesn't do more than that, by the way. It's just that recognition. That is an actual encoding message into your brain when you begin to allow that space, that it's okay not to be ashamed of the fact that you didn't go to the gym every day as you had planned to. This is why New Year's resolutions sucks for everybody, because we kind of feel ashamed, like, oh, I really wanted to and I really didn't do it. It's not about shame. It's about being empathetic with yourself, being compassionate with yourself, and recognizing, hey, it's been a crappy year. It's okay to have wanted to try and not being able. Success is not linear. Life is not linear. But also enables, when you begin to practice this more and more, as you become an empath, it enables you to be more empathetic towards others, because then we're less judgmental. We understand that if we've gone through this, possibly, very possibly, others are also going through something similar. So empathy at its best begins to help you define your product, your story mission, your brand story, your personal brand story, begins to look at your audience. So in the design thinking context, this is how I began to learn empathy, and I began to apply empathy. I thought deeper into who my audience was, what inclusion looked like, what the layers of that looked like, who the characters are in my story, what they play. So many times we get this tunnel vision. I have an idea, I serve a product, I code, and that's me, and that's it. No, we live in a digital world. We are worldwide. Today, I'm connecting with you, and you're connecting with me. I'm in Miami Beach. I don't know where you are, but we are connected. That's powerful. That's technology. Years ago, we couldn't do this. So if we think about the power, the sheer power of that, our audience is global. And, Satya, our CEO, says all the time, if we're going to go empower the world, we got to look like the world. Consider the audience as you design, as you create, as you architect. What the plot looks like. What will it end? What will it end on? What will be the next generation? How will they take these machines that are being encoded today? How will they use them for the better of humankind? You get to actually also ideate. Give yourself ideas on possible other scenarios. Empathy looks at everything. Empathy looks at the scenarios. For us, what does our audience look like when the story or the design is already out there? What are the possibilities? Not just what the audience looks like today, but what will it look like in three more decades, and what will they do with that technology? So think deeper. Think about that conclusion. What does that look like? Use your empathy tool through the design process and think futuristic, because the future is now. What you see here is an acronym that I use in my practice in storytelling as SCAMPER. And as I use this, it enables me to think through layers of my design process. Whether it's a story or a product, think through, hey, what if I reversed, combined, modified something? What are the things that I can do to add layers, intersectionality, and inclusion to the design? And then, of course, prototyping, as you know, is the design process. Prototyping really, beyond just prototypes, small, low cost, low effort ideas. To me, what prototyping has done in the empathy tool is that it's enabled me to check myself and my ego all the time, to tell myself I don't have it all put together. It's just a prototype, right? It may not work, and that's okay. I'm creating different concepts. I'm not just creating one big thing that's going to land and that's going to be the silver bullet. No, design with empathy. It's, hey, we're practicing. This is a practice mode. It may land, it may not. Let's take this journey together with our audiences. Let's embed them into our process. Let's include them and see where we have missed something or where we have missed an audience, because we could have. Inclusion today looks different than it did even 5 years ago. When we think about social injustices, the things that haven't transpired in our humanity, that will continue to transpire, to be honest, this enables more and more an opportunity for us to think through, remove our ego, if you will, as designers, as creators, as innovators, and sit back and think about how what we're doing is going to impact our society today and tomorrow. And of course, lastly is testing. Back to that test dummy. So many cars are being built today, even today. In fact, in 2011, the Security Commission realized that the cars that are being tested today, and that when you go buy a car and you say, hey, they passed the rating test 4.5 out of 5, it's still being tested on men. There are some test crash dummies that are women that have failed the test. So it doesn't matter if we have them, it's still happening. So a machine that was built decades ago, today we're still reeling with the consequences that it was biased and that it didn't have empathy. Ask yourself, in the story that you're building, in the next generations, in the design that you're creating, in the innovation that you're being a part of, are you evoking the emotion that you want from the many inclusive perspectives that you need to have? Is everyone going, this is also for me? Thank you, because you built it for me. You thought of me. Think about how empathy embeds itself in the machine, how we can rise above the machines. And lastly, think about how to do this in the story. As you build your story, as all of us build a story of empathy, think about the character, the plot, the conclusion. If it doesn't have that, it's not a story. It's just a product. It's just data. It's just information. For us, story is important. In fact, we know very well that story is what has saved humankind. It is before alphabets were created, before print. We just told stories to survive. How will we survive the next generation of the machines? Through story. So give your stories and build your stories for your audience, not just to them. Insert empathy and authenticity in everything that you do. Ideate. Give yourself the opportunity and give humanity the gift of ideation so that you can rise against the machines. Thank you so much. I hope this was good for you and that you enjoyed it and that you learned something. I know we're going to have some Q&A as well, so looking forward to that.
Well, Miri, that was amazing. Thank you very much. That was lots of words. That was fabulous.
Thank you.
Yeah, really good. I've got a couple of questions while Richard's going to keep an eye on the questions.
That's good.
So you talked about writing for techies. Do you think techies are good at being empathetic?
No, I don't. I can tell you that because I have worked with them very much, and they've researched this audience very much. I can say this. I can say no. I should say that it takes them a little while to understand the importance of inserting that empathy. Some are, so there is a personality component to empathy. Some are empathetic by nature. Most are not, because they're driven and they come in with this idea of science and data, and that's what we need. It's the only thing we need. And yes, it's the only thing we need to begin with the building the materials and the foundation of that technology. But again, reminding ourselves that technology is being used and delivered to humans. And that's where we begin to actually insert that empathy level. That's where that cycle starts of saying, okay, I have the raw material, I have the data, and I have the information that I need, and I have the science that I need. Now, let's not forget, this is going to go to humans.
Okay, I've got one more question before we go to the audience. Do you think people are being hired based on the person being interviewed being a good fit for empathy and things like that? Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say at a higher level. So of course, we just got done through recruiting season at Microsoft for our students, for our university folk. And I'm not a recruiter myself. We have a recruiting team that goes out and finds that talent for us, and then we bring them into our intern program. One of the things that we consistently look through, and we ask that question, why Microsoft? And the question is not meant to be answered in the way of like, oh, because Microsoft has great technology. I love what they're doing for social good, and I love AI for good. That's all, yes, that's all part of it. But truly, we look at culture fit. How do the core values that you have embed with ours? To us, it's about what the culture of the company looks like today, how we evolve it day in day. Inclusion is part of that culture, of course. Empowerment, so we have these core values. And so if you come in and you have a great academia and experience, but you're not like we used to be, we call ourselves learners today, but we used to be all knowing before. So if you still come in with that idea of like, hey, I know it all instead of I'm gonna learn it all, you probably won't fit in our culture anymore. And so for us, it's important that empathy is one of those things. We talk about leading with empathy. If you're a leader in the industry, you're not leading with empathy, and that's not demonstrated, you probably will not fit in the company.
Yeah, good answer. I really like the comment, your time and your money don't lie. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, and I had to, what's that, Richard?
I was just going to say, Jamie McGuire also liked this quote you gave as well, which was good.
Hi, Jamie. That's not my quote. That's actually Satya's mantra,
Right.
and I use it because it's real. I mean, it's like we always talk about inclusion, and then we forget. We forget to just pause for a moment and be empathetic. And yeah, so money and calendar don't lie, man. I mean, I had to do that with myself. I calibrate every year, as I said, and I can say so much. I like to do this and I like to do that, or I love my family. If family time is not on your calendar, you're lying. That's it. It's as real as that. And so we can say so many things, but we really have to come to terms of our reality as we get better, as we calibrate, empathize with ourselves, because we have to do that to get better.
Cool. I've got one other question for you. What makes you get up in the morning, just out of interest?
Well, so many things, but truly for me, it's my own mission. So my mission started 8 years ago. I began this branding, self-branding project when I actually went through a very terrible time when I first started at Microsoft. And so that experience enabled me to create a mission, especially for women, to stay in the industry. It is definitely hard. We are not, we haven't cracked the code yet. We are still a very, very hard minority in terms of like how we're going to move that needle to really represent more and more in the industry. So for me, what gets me up is my own mission that I've given myself to inspire these women to build a brand that for them, it tells them they can also do the same. I'm not nobody special. What I want to do is model these ideas that we can all build ourselves and build our mission and our brand to do more and leave a legacy. All of us want to leave a legacy in the world, right? That's what we're built to do. But a lot of us don't do the intention piece of that and the work that it requires. And so what gets me up in the morning is my legacy. How will I be remembered long after I'm gone? And I hope that people will recognize the work that I've been doing, especially for women in tech.
Fabulous, absolutely fabulous. Let me have a quick check of questions.
We've just got a question from Jamie, so I'll just pop it up on the screen now.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so in terms of weaving a story or narrative around a product or service, what channels do you deliver the best impact? Video, the written word? That's a great question, Jamie. This is more around back to that empathy, the cognitive empathy level. The channels, the structure, the models, the characters that you're going to use in weaving that story really all depend on first on your audience, who that audience is. Somebody invented the hero's journey, and it was great. Everybody talks about the hero's journey model, but that's just one. And that's something that served them, and that might serve you, but you know your audience best, or you should know your audience best. And so when it comes to even channels, where your audience is something you have to think through. For me personally, when I thought about my audience, I didn't have an Instagram account at all, and I realized they were on Instagram. So for me to reach that audience, I had to go on Instagram. And when you look at my Instagram account, it's very different than my LinkedIn and very different than my Twitter. And the reason is it's dedicated to this audience. I build that content based on them. It's women in tech. It's, hey, women empowerment is, it's all that queendom stuff. It's for them. And so if you follow me and you're not my audience, thank you for following. It's dedicated to a specific cohort, and you'll see that in the content. So a storyline, and you'll have many stories, will be weaved differently through your audience base, especially if you have a hybrid audience. So think about products and services that we deliver at Microsoft. We have an array of customers, from a 12-year-old Xbox player to a 50-year-old IT pro in the cloud. And so the word empowerment is the truth, the universal truth of our story. We empower the 12-year-old and we empower the 50-year-old. But definitely that empowerment looks different. The delivery of our story looks different through the different layers of our audience base. So anything from structure, anything from the service and the product, you have to think through and cognitively say, okay, is this product going to a female cohort of a certain demographic? How do we deliver that best? And we empathize with them to talk about that storyline. If it's delivered to a different cohort, how do we deliver this best? So you do think through the character, the plot, the conclusion with empathy.
Great, cool. Awesome. I think we've got another question, Richard.
Yeah, from Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. 3 things to focus on, areas to focus on. Yeah, absolutely. So I would say when we think about empathy, and especially for content delivery, for brand delivery, for yourself, 3 things that I focus on are the personal aspect of what we deliver, the inspirational aspect of what we deliver, and the educational. And by educational, I mean insightful. I don't mean you can Google it. If you can Google it, it's not educational. Insightful is something that you bring your own lived experience, your own insights into that piece of information. And so nobody has it but you. And so when you focus on these 3 areas to deliver a product, to create, to innovate, and you consider these 3 areas, you go through this calibration of like, okay, how do I inspire with this product? How do I deliver something that nobody else has seen? That's innovation. That's a new written story that nobody else has because it hasn't existed before. And then the very personal piece of that is your why. Back to checking in and saying, why am I doing this? Why am I creating this? Why is this important to me? When I began to ask these questions to our engineers in data, when they were moving the on-premises data to the cloud, and I got to interview a whole lot of them, it was really interesting because I learned that their why was very different, but at the same time, it had the same theme around the empowerment that they were receiving and they were giving by creating a new way of a connected world on the intelligent edge and the intelligent cloud. At the same time, they were actually scared to think, well, once that happens, where do we go? What do we do? How does our job look like? Right? It's something they had never done before. And so we are experiencing more and more these newer technologies that we're creating. Ironically, we don't know what they're going to go do and what's going to happen once we create them. So this idea of personal brings us back and center ourselves into what we're doing in our why, so that we check ourselves every single time and we don't get lost in this innovation piece without checking in and being compassionate empaths to ourselves.
Awesome. I think got any more questions, Richard? Don't see any.
No, just basically summarizing. Andrew's like saying thank you very much. It's all about that unique selling point for each individual and everything. So that's awesome. We just got like Isadora saying the next generation's definitely going to remember you, which is awesome.
Oh, Isadora, I feel the same about you. I love what you're doing with the Holly in the head in the cloud and the heart of the community blog. I think it's exciting in the podcast and all of the things that you're doing to also think about the heart. And I think that's so important. Back to this idea that we're letting the robots be robots, and we're going to be more human as we enter this very incredible, exciting digital age that it has been accelerated by something like COVID, truly it is important to continue doing things with the heart and checking in with our own hearts as well. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. Thank you, Gregor and Richard. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. You can definitely reach out to me. I think we're going to give away a book as well, so stay tuned for that. I think Gregor will actually announce it on Twitter.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much, Miri. This session's been absolutely unbelievable. So thanks for everyone who joined. Thanks, Richard, for doing all the.
Thank you for having me. Yes, thanks.
Yeah. Right,
Awesome.
I think we'll. Sorry, you go, Richard.
Yeah. So thanks everyone,
Yeah.
and we'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.